podcast. We are not turning wrenches today. We're actually sitting around a table, and we're going to talk about a subject that I get asked about almost every day. I think most people know I was military, so I wasn't raised with a lot of money. I was enlisted, and then I created FantomWorks with the help of a lot of great people. So as a result, people come to me all the time and say, how did this all happen? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about, because my wife probably won't agree with a lot of the decisions I've made. I know Audrey doesn't agree with anything that I've ever done. And Raf, unbeknownst to me, actually supports me in doing something else even crazier.
That's right.
So that's what we want to go into today. So for those people who have sort of said, how does a normal person start a company? I'm hoping maybe you'll get something out of this. So we're going to start out with, I'm just going to ask you real quickly, do you think in general was starting the company FantomWorks a good choice?
I love FantomWorks.
I met you. You were a waitress. It was a...
Havana's. I was working a bar, Granby Street.
But why did you talk to me and not the other two guys?
Because you didn't hit on me.
Yeah, I decided not to follow suit, and in fact, what really impressed me was how well you handled yourself. But that was probably a little bit unorthodox, someone sitting at lunch and then calling you up and saying, do you want a job, right?
Yeah, no, you stopped me right before you left and said if I was serious and really wanted a job to call you.
Okay, that seemed to work. Now, was it a good idea to create FantomWorks?
I think I initially said this is probably not a good idea because it's a luxury item. Like, how many old cars are out there?
Yeah.
You know, I was a little nervous. Plus, it sounded expensive, and like not everybody has money to spend on expensive toys. So I think I was probably more of a discouraging voice than you were hoping for.
Okay. And I don't listen real well, so apparently I missed all that. Raf, in general, you've started several businesses. Take a quick rundown of, you got out of high school. Now, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Your dad was a multi-billionaire, right?
Right. Well, again, as to the FantomWorks question, it was a great idea because you fixed my cars. Okay. It was a great idea. In terms of me, I was born in the South Bronx in the middle of the worst time when buildings were on fire, crazy things and all of that. I became an electrical engineer, and then from there on, I was working for a couple of companies. Decided I did like working for companies, started one, and was lucky and successful and was able to take it public.
Taking something public, we won't have time today to go into that, but really quickly, what was your basic steps to create a company? I mean, did you have money to do it? Or?
I didn't have any money, but what I had was a pretty good idea. I had worked as an engineer for 2 or 3 years after college, and as I worked through, I would work on a project, get really good at it, and then want to move on to the next one. They wouldn't let me because, no, we need you on that project. You're the project engineer. To quit, go to another company, work on that project. Can I work on the next new project? No, you can't work on that because you're too valuable for what you're doing. So finally I realized that the only way I was going to be able to do what I wanted to do was to quit, start my own company, then I could work whatever projects I wanted. The way I did that was I left with a couple of other guys and we devised these products that were useful to the US government, particularly in the intelligence services. And in doing that, we started to make some money. Didn't know what we were doing, but we started to make some money. And people came to us and said, hey, that's such a great idea. Maybe you should go public. But I'll tell you one interesting point that is sometimes lost. After the company went public, I had founded a company, done all the stuff, I got fired.
I hear that happens a lot.
That's actually not that unusual,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I didn't realize that Steve Jobs got fired from Apple by his own people.
Right, or as he did I was a great engineer, but I knew nothing about business. And I almost was running the company into the ground.
Should I have been fired at any point in this?
I would have fired myself and you.
Okay.
Different days, different people would have been fired, but yes.
All right, so I'm just gonna, was FantomWorks a good idea? I think if you asked several thousand clients who we built cars for, I think most of them would say it was a great idea. I think if you asked, ultimately the television show, if you asked the audience, we have a very good following, I think a lot of them would say yes. But let me tell you the bad parts of FantomWorks. Is FantomWorks an easy company to run, Audrey?
No, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Melissa, does FantomWorks, the company, actually make a lot of money?
Well, it took 10 years, but Not a lot.
Not the. I was going to say.
Not a lot.
Yeah, the real estate
Make a
investments.
lot, but we also spend a lot. So that's
okay,
the
but
problem.
I'm talking about right. I'm talking about the little slice of the pie left over at the end.
Right.
It's not a big slice, is it?
No.
Okay, so
Not as much as I think people expect.
Oh, everybody-
For running your own
Right.
business, they think, oh, you're a business person, you make tons of money.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I mean, we sleep in beds of money from the day we open
Oh
our first
yeah,
business,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely, sure, yeah, absolutely. That's the way it happens. Yeah,
And many years at FantomWorks, I am the lowest hourly paid employee in the company, and that's absolutely the truth. So it isn't what people think it is. And one of the reasons you mentioned it was premium goods. So there's an economic term called inferior goods. All right, and I learned this, and I don't necessarily love the name because my professor said an inferior good is something that people buy more of when the economy is down. And so when the economy is up, we buy premium goods. So he cited macaroni and cheese as an inferior good. Okay,
That
so
is not an inferior good. That is a staple.
so you've got the same visceral reaction I did because I'll tell you, we couldn't afford macaroni and cheese when I was growing up. We literally, that was considered a luxury in my family. But you understand the premise that in a down economy, more people eat macaroni and cheese than they eat filet mignon. But in a really good economy, people are like, I can have macaroni and cheese later. I'm going to have my filet today, right? So the problem with FantomWorks is that it really dealt in more exotic goods, luxury goods, right?
items,
Yeah.
And so I believe we are the best value and the most economically priced for what you get car shop in the world, but is what we do cheap? There's a difference.
Not. It's expensive. It requires skilled labor. It requires, a lot of your time, which is expensive. So, yeah, it is just not cheap. And time is money, right? So the more time something takes, the more money it's going to cost.
Raf, you dabble in even more expensive toys because you dabble in aircraft. And are they cheap?
They are definitely not cheap, but I think what FantomWorks, at least what it meant to me, was the experience that it brought in terms of driving the cars that I drove. And I think for most of your clients, that's what they go for, the experience of from their youth, the cars from their youth. And what you're going to find is in the modern economic context, experiences are what matter. That's what people pay big money for,
And
the
I think
experience.
that's a good point, is that if they've been waiting, and that's why our tagline is because you've waited long enough.
Right.
Because if you've been waiting for years, 5, 7, 10, 20 years, you want to finally drive this vehicle. So
Right.
even if it takes a year or two, you're now into it. Whereas you've already waited 5 or 20 years, now you can be into it in a year or two.
Right.
And yeah, it's going to be expensive because somebody else is doing the work. But at least you now get to enjoy that luxury item that you've always
Exactly,
wanted
and
to
that
enjoy.
and that experience is, there used to be a commercial that would say about, this and that and the other thing, and the experience is priceless. And that experience is priceless, and that's what people really go for.
All right, so we've talked about, because I call FantomWorks, and I'm stealing the line from Apollo 13, I call FantomWorks a successful failure. And what I mean by that is we've had a lot of successes, but is it possible to grow this company, really?
Not like you originally wanted.
No, it's impossible.
We would have to clone you, and I don't think they've.
I don't know that anybody would want that. And is it really even possible for me to go on vacations?
We have differing opinions on that one.
But I try to make those break short. My wife and I used to take 30-day vacations. We've done it several times. The longest vacation we've taken with FantomWorks Open is about 5 business days, and we're generally working on those 5 days in some form or fashion. So to me, it's a successful failure. So that sort of leads me to, so if you want to start a business, and I did several of the things wrong, because I'm going to mention a few rules, and so I've got 3 different sets of rules. One was from my econ professor, one was from a very dear friend, and one was from someone that, I can't even remember who it was, but his rule 1 was, he said, there's only one rule to start a business. Start with $1 million. When I said, what's rule number 2? He said, when you figure out rule number 1, you'll know rule number 2. Now, what do you think about that rule for starting a new business?
I think for starting a new business, it certainly helps if you could start with $1 million. But I think most people don't have the $1 million. So I think you have to find some other way to start. And I think that way to start is basically you have to have a vision that you see that you want to happen. that you want to have something that doesn't exist today and you want it to exist tomorrow. In many respects, starting a business is a lot like farming. You know, you have to look at that field, there's nothing there now, and you know that you're going to have to seed it, water it, work on it, you know, from sun up to sundown and what have you. But so I think, yes, if you have $1 million, your farm will be much more successful.
But let's just say the $1 million is a metaphor, because I think it is. In other words, I know people that if you gave them $100,000, they would be broke the next week. And if you can't hang on to wealth, then you can't create wealth. So I think what he really meant was figure out how to create wealth.
Right.
Now, would you agree that that is a valid business?
Well, that's definitely a valid business. And I think the $1 million, to your point of a metaphor, is that you have to have $1 million worth of work ethic, $1 million worth of ideas, enthusiasm, those kinds of things. $1 million worth of
drive,
the ability to pull people together. But again, it all starts with vision. But then something which, Dan, you have a lot, and we see it often, is vision isn't a solution. Everything depends on execution. So you have to be able to execute, and that's the other part to it. So you have to bring $1 million worth of execution to the party.
Yeah.
And you have to be your own cheerleader, right? Because
That's
sometimes
right.
people are going to be resistant, and you've got to, you're going to be like, no, I see this vision, I have this vision, we're going to make it happen. And you just, you become your own cheerleader and make it happen.
Okay, so here's the one thing I would like to at least leave this one rule with. I know guys that'll say to me, man, if someone would just give me $1 million, I'd turn it into $2 million in a year. And in my head, I'm saying, if someone gave you $1 million, they'd turn it into nothing really fast, because you don't have a penny in your pocket and no assets, and you've literally squandered every penny you've ever had. So can we agree that the understanding of how to take something and build on it, whether that's a piece of property, an idea, or a bank account, is important?
Absolutely. And again, that's one of the reasons why government fails so often, because if they give you something, if you're sitting and thinking, so if someone gives me X, I will produce 3X, they're already at a loss.
Yeah.
Because you have to bring the game to it, and then you have to make it.
That's right.
Because if they give you something, in many respects, they've already hurt you.
Yeah, I have never been a believer in giving people free stuff. People will take every free thing they can get, and 99.9% don't appreciate any of it.
By the way, we see that right now in the current economy. If you look at all of the value that's been lost on Wall Street or in venture, it's all these venture companies that are unicorns. You find out they made $1 billion, they're now valued at $1 billion, but then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, they're nowhere. The reason was because someone gave them money on something crazy, some idiotic idea that they had, some vision they had, but they didn't bring what you said, Dan. They didn't bring their $1 million metaphorically.
Yeah.
When you give something to someone, when they say to you, hey, if you give me 10 million, I will do whatever. Not that investments should be made, but if that is the crux of what they need, then you've got the wrong person.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go to the next one. Mike Dillon, who started Dillon Aerospace at 43, and I was 43 when I told my wife we were starting a company. She just looked at me and shook her head. But he was the same age, and he was one of my inspirations. He gave me 2 rules: work until you drop, and pay people as much as you possibly can afford to pay them. What do you think of those rules?
I mean, I think that working at FantomWorks, you've always paid me what I believed I deserved. I've never had to ask for raises or anything like that. I think it does make your employees care more knowing that they are actually valued. I think making your employees feel valued does make you successful in business.
All right. Now, you don't get a paycheck, so how do you feel about all this?
I have the checkbook. I can
That's right.
Yeah, you probably, that's stupid of me. Yeah.
She's the accountant. Don't ever look at the books.
Yeah, okay, all right. So,
No, but I know you did work until you drop. I mean, I know you were always, on the phone or talking with people or working after hours, and you actually go out on the floor and help the guys if they have a problem that they can't fix or can't figure out. You're there to kind of close that gap and get them going again, and that's part of why it's difficult to replicate, is because we don't have someone with that overall, expertise, engineer, production, business, all
Yeah.
of that in
Okay.
one person.
Well, there's an industry term that I didn't like, and it's called hustle. What do you think? Is hustle a positive word or a bad word?
I think hustle is a very positive word.
Good.
So,
I was hoping you weren't going to go.
but again, when you talk about working, I think that any successful business requires a true leader or leaders. And one thing that I learned a long time ago was there's only one way to lead, and that's by example. And if you want your people to work, and in business I've been in, then you've got to have the work ethic that could potentially, definitely outwork them.
Yeah.
Because you can't be telling people, hey, come into work if you're not the first one in and the last one out.
Yes.
That's basically. And the other place is, the only place to lead people from is from the front. You've got to be doing it yourself.
Yeah.
So now again, people say, well, I manage or whatever. Yes, you can, and you do some of that. But what I learned is, look, I went back to vision. Vision is very important, but you've got to outwork your workers, you've got to outwork your competitors. If you're not willing to work, then basically, I've never seen a successful business where the founders weren't working their asses off.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
Because if they're not, because basically everyone looks to you.
You set the tone.
You don't manage them, you lead them. And if you are managing them, then you're probably not going to be very successful. I mean, you might succeed to some point, but in terms of making something exceptional, which is the only reason you should get up in the morning if you're running a business, is to make something exceptional, or at least attempt to make something exceptional. If you're not doing that, then you might as well go make soup.
All right, now, Audrey.
I like soup too, but I
hate
mean,
soup.
Oh, she hates. I don't know how anyone
like
can
soup.
hate soup.
I hate
So when you came on board, would you agree that you had less hustle than you do today?
Very much so.
Do you enjoy having the greater hustle?
I don't think it's so much the greater hustle. Like when I was bartending, I made my money and all of that. Like so I did well for myself.
I'm talking about when you came to FantomWorks.
Right, but I'm saying like I had to learn a lot more skills to be able to have a hustle at FantomWorks. Like I could not just come in with the basic knowledge I had and like knowing QuickBooks and be anywhere close to where I am at this point. Like I had to change my hustle from money to learning different skills so that I could have a hustle here.
Okay.
Program managing and right.
And how do you feel about hustle? Good connotation? I mean, at this point, you'd be against everyone if you said it's a bad thing. Because it sounds negative, right? The hustler.
No, I don't
Well,
think so.
I mean that's different. If you have a
That's
hustler
that's
versus
what I'm getting
having
at.
hustle,
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, if you're going to hustle someone, that might be a negative connotation.
Right.
But if you've got hustle, then
So it's an interesting word, right? But can we agree that it is another one of those things? And I think that goes back to work until you're ready to drop. You have to be making progress, right? You can't
Right.
just be chasing your tail all day long.
Agreed.
That
Agreed.
isn't a hustle.
Look, again, and as I said about vision being important, when I would hire people or work with people, it would be, I don't mind, I would rather take 60% vision and 90% execution than the other way around. And hustle, even in sports, it's like when we have a ground ball and the person doesn't go to pick it to go make the play to first base, or doesn't run down, you run as hard as you can because the guy could drop the ball. So you run that's hustle, in the sense that if the ball's going out there, it's going to go out, be a home run. You run into that wall, climb as high as you can, try to catch it. You might not catch it, but at least
don't give up.
But at least you made it, because it's not until that last second of the game that it's determined. So same thing with a business. That's where hustle comes in.
We were very fortunate. This lovely young lady and I met in grad school. We were out at Naval Postgrad, and remember Bill Gates? Bill Gates was our econ professor. As the guy
Bill
said,
Gates,
he was much smarter, but a much smaller, bank account. But Bill Gates, talked to us about what it takes, and he talked about having a unique market. And so when you talked about being an electrical engineer and figuring out systems, you had that unique market, right?
Well, it was basically one of the things that hit it where they ain't. Meaning
Right.
that the things that I worked on, the reason I wound up in military intelligence was because basically everyone was building computer equipment and those kinds of things for the regular commercial market. But then we realized, look, we just be one more amongst thousands.
Yeah.
But the government had very specialized, unique needs. So it was a little harder, but it was less competition because we were where everyone else wasn't.
Right.
So that was the part of being unique. Then the other part was being focused. So, because that's you compete on either being cheaper, focused, or unique. So so we looked at focus and unique.
So you may not be the only one in the world, like FantomWorks is not the only garage in the world, but we have become unique in our approach to building cars and our ability to finish cars and things like that. So even though we didn't start out completely unique, I think we've sort of moved in that direction. And then the next one is barriers to entry. Meaning if you were opening a lemonade stand and all it takes is $5 worth of cups, ice, and some lemonade drink mix, if somebody sees you making $50 on a glass of lemonade, believe me, you're going to have so much competition by the end of the day. So you want barriers to entry. So what do you think? Are there big barriers to entry in opening a garage?
Oh, yeah. Especially, even down to the location and having to deal with systems for water and oil separators. Like literally under the ground, there is still things that play into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
and the equipment and having the personnel. Like I said, you can't just grab somebody off the street. You have to have someone with special skills to be able to do what we do.
Okay, but let's talk about, there are garages that open up. A guy goes out and rents a 20 by 40 metal building in downtown and he knows a little bit how to turn a wrench. So people do open businesses doing that, right?
That's true, but then again, as Melissa and Audrey have both mentioned, it depends on the garage. There are lots of vanilla garages.
Yeah.
FantomWorks is not a vanilla garage.
Right.
So that's where I think that in terms of barrier to entry, the barrier to entry that you've erected is one where you have a unique set of skills targeted to a unique market.
Clientele.
Right.
For what it's worth, I'm actually going to disagree a little bit with all of you. And the reason for it is the barriers to entry. Look, we decided to do FantomWorks kind of stupid. We've got this 100-year-old building that's 60,000 square feet that 100 cars will fit in. That's not a logical way to start a garage, in all reality, right?
It's not how it
You don't
started.
have to have it, right?
But it started, we got this way very fast.
Right.
So my point is if you wanted to start a garage and you knew how to turn wrenches, maybe you can go in with lower barriers to entry, but just realize that you're going to have to develop barriers to entry and develop a unique skill set if you want to climb out of that. So for instance, if Audrey, let's just say you loved painting cars. You could have opened a garage. You could have rented a space for $1,000 a month. You could have gotten a paint gun and a compressor and hung out your shingle to do that. But until you get really good at it, or develop a clientele, or develop these barriers to entry, anyone who sees you doing it, Melissa's going to go, she's painting cars and making money. I'm gonna go do the same thing.
I think that to open a business, you have to have two sides. You have to have the business side of it and the ability to do the work. So you still have to know the business end of it. So I don't think it's as cut and dry as that. I think that there are two separate sides that have to be had.
All right, so I didn't pay you to say that, but I'm glad you did, because do you remember our next door neighbor when we lived in DC? The guy he was like a small business consultant, and he gave me a statistic, and I don't know if it was scientific, but he said 90% of small businesses fail because of what happens in the office, not what happens on the floor. And I thought about that and was like, wow, I don't think he's wrong. Do you?
No, I think he's right. What he's saying is that the philosophies and the outlook of the business is decided in the office as opposed to the execution end of it.
Yeah.
So I think Audrey's right, though, that it takes both, because we've seen other businesses that, for example, David with the business that was here before us, he was the business guy, and the person that ran the floor ended up passing away, and he had no clue how to do that, and so he couldn't continue with the business because he couldn't do both sides of it.
Yeah. So if there's a lesson to be learned for starting a small business, is that you do have to understand both sides, and probably the business side is in many ways tougher than the wrench turning, the car painting, or the manufacturing ping pong balls.
Right.
That the floor, my next door neighbor, I don't think he was wrong. He said, people can generally figure out how to build or fix the widget. But doing the stuff behind the office doors is actually the stuff that'll kill a business. So if someone was out there wanting to start a small business, they need to understand that if the business is going to become successful, they're going to have to start, or they're going to have to stop doing the thing that they started the business over. Right?
Absolutely.
So
no doubt.
if you love painting cars, guess what? The only thing you're not going to be allowed to do if you start a business painting cars.
Paint cars.
You're not going to be allowed to paint cars. And that's something that if you start a business, you just sort of have to accept. And for those that can't accept it, they generally don't.
Right.
They don't really go too far. All right. So the biggest problem, man, I'm just going to close out on this because we're going to get to the stupidity that I'm into now, which is EZ Homesteading, but scalability. FantomWorks was never a scalable company. I thought it was going to be, but what we do is so specialized. It takes so much skill from the crew. I mean, every day, do we or do we not talk about business philosophy morning and lunch at virtually every meeting?
Yep.
Talk about what it takes to make a client happy, how we're going to turn the screw with this tool instead of that tool. So we talk about this all the time, and franchising that is not easy.
Right.
And so that's when I realized that FantomWorks, although I think it's a company that I want to see alive for the rest of my life and the rest of your life, the reality is it is about as big as it can ever be.
I agree.
Right? So then we started, I came up with this idea, and I told you about it. I mean, well, it started with me calling Melissa up on a Saturday morning, and I said, stop doing what you're doing. We're going to go to Chesapeake, and we're going to look for a farm. And we jumped in the car, and we found something, made an offer on it the next day, and ended up, we bought the farm, right? What ended up happening at that point was that many, many people started asking me, well, what about this? How do you grow this tree? How do you do this? And that's when I realized that much like FantomWorks, where people were very interested in it, this was something that, to me, had much greater potential in terms of not only sort of getting involved in people's lives, but in also making money. And at the end of the day, what is the most important thing for a business to do?
Gotta make money.
I mean, it's
Gotta make the money.
that nasty thing, but the reality is if you're not making money, what happens? You've seen some garages where paychecks sort of got bounced a few times. How many of those employees stay around?
None of them.
They just, if they can't make,
Survives.
yeah. So making money is critical, and so to me, easy home. Now I'm going to turn this to you. You sort of watched me for about 6 months as we were laying some, literally planting seeds.
Right.
And then you came along and said, I want to get involved. Why?
Well, because what I saw in your concept of easy homesteading, which was the small, very, very small farm, the farmers markets, those things, it hit me, particularly after the whole pandemic, COVID thing, that we get our food from too far a distance when we don't have to. And what you showed me was that, and as I researched it further, that within 45 minutes of most metropolitan areas, there are people producing food. So, and I started thinking from my background in technology that for the last 70 years, technology has been investing in extending the supply chain, getting our food, getting tomatoes from Brazil or from wherever. And that I thought maybe we could turn technology around so that instead of getting the stuff supplied from a distance, why not try to see if we can get it from much closer? So then instead of building scale, having technologies of scale, go to technologies of scope, where what we do is put a lot of little farms together to produce the same thing we're getting from massive farms far away. And that was just an interesting problem or an interesting thing to tackle. Yeah. And you were the right guy to tackle it with, because you're half crazy.
One of my inspirations was our next door neighbor. We've got a guy named Jesse, and he's got a very impressive garden. But I asked him, I said, what do you do with all this food? Because he produces probably thousands of pounds of food. I said, you don't have that many people in your family. What are you going to do with it? And he ends up giving it away, throwing it away. And And it hit me that he's producing this amazing, absolutely organic, just textbook perfect food, and he can't consume it. And I thought, what a waste that is, you know? And so to me, Uber, and look, I hope one day we're as big as Uber or bigger, but the fact is I think Uber has made a huge mistake. I think the whole concept of Uber was if you were driving from point A to point B and you could just give someone a ride, it didn't cost you anything to do it other than maybe a minor detour, and you got paid for what you were already doing. So Uber, the original concept, I think, was we're going to take excess capacity and pay people for their excess capacity, the empty seat in their car. But today, when I talk to Uber drivers, you know, they put 80,000 miles on their vehicle in a year and a half. They burned up a $58,000 vehicle. And if they actually did the math and they went, holy crap, I've lost more money than I've made in the long run. So I think Uber lost its way.
It's a glorified taxi rather than being what
exactly.
you originally thought.
Yeah,
that
and it was supposed to be a ride share program, not a taxi. And it's become a taxi. So when I look at my next door neighbor, how do we stay true to what he's doing, which is producing food for his family, but let him produce more than he thinks he needs so that he's always got plenty, but take that excess and put it into the community.
Right.
And so
capitalize, maybe
Yeah.
get something
Oh,
for it rather
absolutely.
than just letting it, you know, having to give it away or go to
Or
waste.
let it go to waste. I mean, he's monetizing it, and that's what our aim or your aim was to do, to try to get the technology and the processes in place that would permit people to monetize their excess.
That's right. That's
yeah,
a good word.
take what they're throwing in the garbage. Imagine if you could get paid, instead of taking that trash bag out to the corner, to get paid for your trash bag. And that's sort of the concept of what this is. So the idea of it, where it's very different from FantomWorks, is that FantomWorks is unscalable, super high technical skills, super high customer relation and customer service demand, where something like this is that, at least at its base, we take things that people aren't using and we pay them for it. But let me tell you another really fun phone call I had. I was looking for wheat because I went to a survival store and I wanted whole, in fact, what I wanted was the actual grains. I didn't even want processed wheat. Right. I wanted grains. Well, the closest store to here that you can buy the grain at, the raw natural grain, is about 300 miles. And I'm not driving 300 miles, and the cost of shipping a 50-pound bag is more than the cost of the grain itself.
That's right.
So I called up a few farmers I know, and I said, is there anyone producing raw grain? They said, absolutely. So I got the number of a guy, called him up, and I said, are you interested in selling? He goes, I would be, but when the price went down below 15 cents a pound, he said it wasn't worth it for me. The grain that you have to buy at this place 300 miles from here was 50 to 75 cents a pound. And that's if you drive there to pick it up. And so I said, what if you could get, say, 30 cents a pound for your grain? Would you produce it? He said, I will produce it all day long for 30 cents a pound. Well, if the market is willing to pay 60 or more, and he's willing to produce it for 30, all we've got to do is connect those dots.
Right, and arbitrage it.
Yeah. And so, basically everything's already there. It was, all we have to do is basically connect the phone from this guy to this guy, and suddenly this guy is getting paid more and this guy's buying it for less. And now we get to buy locally, and we get to buy better nutrition, better fresh, So I'm going to sort of punch someone in the face right now and say something. But I went to farmers markets. I went to a lot of farmers markets, and I talked to a lot of people. I mean, I'm that idiot that just, we'll strike up a conversation and talk about all sorts of inappropriate things. But I said, how much are you making? What are you doing? How many hours are you standing out here? But when I asked the question that I wasn't expecting the answer to, it was, how much of what you're selling here is locally produced or organic, either one? what do you think the farmer's market answer was within 50 miles of where we're sitting right now? What do you think the percentage of locally produced fruits and vegetables is?
Well, it shouldn't be at 90%. I mean,
Or more, right?
Right.
Wouldn't you think so?
You
Go to
would,
the farmer's
but
market.
it
The
probably
only
isn't.
stuff that I've ever seen local was honey. That was
Okay.
honestly local. But as far as fruits and vegetables, they take them out of like Walmart containers and put them in other containers. Like I've watched them do it.
But that sort of destroys the whole idea of the farmer's market, right?
Oh no, I threw a tantrum and left.
Yeah.
Like
Less than 10% is what I calculated. And I mean, and let me tell you, when I say 10%, I'm actually making it a double-digit number when it really should be a single-digit number. And so there again, Audrey, are you willing to pay more for an apple if it's produced in your community by someone that you're helping out?
yeah.
Would you feel better about buying that apple than an apple from a massive farm in Iowa or Washington?
Overall, yes. It wouldn't bother me to buy the other
True,
apple though.
true, but the question is, you probably wouldn't have to pay more if there was a technology available to allow you to do that.
Okay, so now we're getting to the crux of it.
Right.
So what if we could get you the locally produced and more naturally grown, helping the community product at a very competitive price? How does suddenly that?
seems like a no-brainer, right?
Okay.
I will say it would honestly depend on the price difference because I'm still going to have to go to like Food Lion or whatever for other things. Like I'm not going to be able to get all of the things that I need at a farmer's market. So if it's roughly the same price, I might not always go to the farmer's market if I already have to go to Food Lion and it's going to be the same price. Like if it's not saving me that much money and I'd have to make 2 trips, I might just go to the one store.
Okay, and that's fair enough. But let me tell you where you might change your mind. If you take a real piece of fruit, whether it's a tomato, a berry, fruits, vegetables,
Mangoes, all the mangoes.
Mangoes are terrible.
They're delicious.
I don't like mangoes.
I know they'll kill me, but they are delicious.
Gag a maggot. All right.
Ugh.
So if you could eat something that tastes much better, is that something you'd be willing to go out of your way for?
If it tastes much better, yes. Maybe a
Wow,
little
you
bit.
are okay. She's a tough customer.
Well,
All right, so
I'm just being honest. Like
Yeah,
I
we
hate,
don't
I
love-
hate,
okay.
I hate going grocery
hang on.
shopping.
We're
like
going to start a
make,
boycotting list here for.
I want to make as few as stops as possible when I have to go
Okay.
to a store. I like to know what I need, go in, get it, and leave. I
What if you
hate
could get
window
it-
shopping and stuff.
How about a
Like,
delivery service then?
oh yeah.
Okay,
I
so
get
if you could-
tacos delivered.
Okay,
like-
so
Right.
tacos. Well, there's some health food. Well, I mean, clearly it's working for
I'm
you. I'm
working
not
on
sure
it.
how. So if you could get the better foods delivered to you now, would that be the game changer for you?
yes.
Okay.
I'm big on convenience.
All right. Now I'm going to bring out, we talked about before, premium goods or luxury goods.
Luxury goods.
Luxury goods versus inferior goods. I don't like the fact that FantomWorks deals really only in luxury goods. And as a result, look, let's face it, like a small invoice for us is $10,000. That's just the reality, okay? $50,000 is not uncommon at all. And not everybody who drives down Hampton Boulevard can stroke a check for 50 grand, right? So we have lost 90% of society because what we deal in is expensive. Now, EZ Home, you could buy a banana, an apple, or a tomato for $1 through this service. So I believe what we're dealing with here is products that do better in a down economy, because you don't have to have another flat screen TV. And I know this is going to come as a shock to you. You don't have to have another pair of shoes or something like that.
Whoa. This is getting
I
personal.
knew I was going to get, but you understand what I'm
But
saying.
it's also marketable to more people.
That's-
I mean, that's the
that's
thing,
what
is that not everybody needs or wants a classic car.
They
but
should.
everybody probably is
Well-
going to want a tomato or
Right,
an apple.
Oh,
Or,
wait a second. I think everybody wants one.
They
most
may
people
not admit
need
it to
one.
themselves. Okay,
yeah.
try talking to the younger generation, because all of them I've talked to do not want an older car.
Yeah, well,
So-
that's a concern.
Yeah.
So, but you understand, food, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it has to be one of the first things
Right.
that you spend your money on, right? Look, if it's either
all have to
food or
eat.
it's energy, right? You either have to have lights on or food on the table. And sometimes you have to make that decision,
That's right.
which is why we're going to, actually, with EZ Home, we're going to be dealing with both of those and trying to make both of those accessible at the best price point possible. But you get the point, is that in a down economy, you still are going to buy a tomato, bread, and mustard for your sandwich. So if we deal in what is effectively an inferior good, which ironically is food,
Right.
then I think you open yourself up to a much bigger market.
Absolutely. Everyone who eats.
Well, and I will say there's something called the Feingold diet. And it is for people that have a lot of different allergies or a lot of different issues. They say it has to deal with ADHD and all of these other things. And they remove colors and dyes and preservatives from that, and you take all of that stuff out of your diet. And I know people that have done it, and changing your lifestyle to an organic, it raises your grocery bill like drastically.
does.
You're not buying like the regular $5 box of whatever, you're buying the $15 box because it doesn't have all the things in it. So I mean, if you are doing like more organic and stuff like that, and that is your market at the grocery store, that is all the premium stuff, but you are doing it as your base. So, I mean, that will give you an edge on it. Like, you are going to be cheaper than going to Food Lion and getting their organic versus their regular apples, you know?
Okay, so you've hit on something, and what we have to talk about is a short-term investment versus long-term. If you decide not to fill your gas tank before you go on a 200-mile drive, have you saved money by not filling your gas tank? So we can agree that maybe spending money sometimes saves you money in the long run, right? Because you don't have to pay the tow bill. So is it possible that eating better actually saves you money because you don't have the medical bills? Is
Yeah, absolutely. With
Certainly
no doubt.
possible.
Yeah,
No doubt.
I
So-
mean,
no doubt.
it goes hand in hand.
right. So maybe eating better, although you do pay more for it up front, and I'm going to agree with you. You pay more to eat better up front, but in the long run, if you're healthier and you don't have to buy new blue jeans every 6 months because you've gained another inch or whatever, maybe that's not a bad thing. And maybe, in fact, in the long run, you're actually saving money, right?
Well, I mean, for years, the whole thing has been going to McDonald's. It's more expensive to get their salad than the burger. Like,
I know,
it's cheaper for you to eat bad than
Yeah.
to take care of yourself. Like, that's been the whole thing for years at this point.
Right.
You can get a burger and
Sad but
soda
true.
for cheaper than a bottle of water and a salad.
Yeah.
Because that all goes hand in hand with the way everything's been designed to scale, to go further, to do those kinds of things. That's what makes it cheaper, not that it's inherently cheaper. And we're turning it around.
Yeah. So we could launch on so many subjects right now, but we're going to do an entire series. So some of the things we've touched on today, we're going to spend more time on. But I want to throw something out to you. As I've done research and looked into health and looked into some of these things, it's an interesting question. Does the government, and the government has become this monstrous entity, does the government actually want the people to be healthy? And I don't know that, I mean, you're welcome to respond to that if you want to, and I think it's more of a rhetorical question, but there is significant evidence. Look, we've got the FDA and the USDA, and we've got, all of these programs to eat better, but when you actually start dissecting what's going on, you can make the case for maybe when the smoke clears, it doesn't really look like that when it's all done. So that's something that I want to talk about in a future podcast. But this whole idea, we'll have to decide, is it going to be well accepted? Because if, in fact, the government does not really want people eating healthy,
I live off of Red Bull and cupcakes. I'm the wrong person to ask these
Okay, so-
questions.
And you do. I've yelled at you.
She doesn't.
I've yelled at her for her Red Bull.
I think the government is, sometimes we give the government too much credit that they think about these things and sort of Machiavellian-wise make it happen. I think what happens is the government, like everyone else, follows the road of least resistance, meaning that they want to please as many people as possible. They want to make it easy. They want profits they don't want problems with companies not making enough money. And if all the companies are architected to deliver hamburgers cheaper than lettuce, the government's not going to say, well, no, we don't want you to do that because McDonald's is a big company and makes money for them. Not that they're evil or anything. Same thing is if people like to drink Coca-Cola because it's sugar water and it makes them feel good, the government could, look, in New York when I lived there, or not after I lived, Bloomberg actually did this tax. If you got like the big
Giant
Slurpees,
cola.
they would charge, he would force them to charge you. People hated it. And the government's not going to, they got to get elected. They say,
Right.
hold it, you're
That's
charging
true.
me more for Slurpee? Heck with you, you're out. So I don't think it's the government that they're sitting there thinking, how are we going to screw
Evil
people over?
ways.
I think what they're doing is that, hey, if we make people do healthy things, they won't like us. They'll vote us out. So I think you give them more credit. I don't think they're thinking
You
about
were the one that taught me, and I'm going to screw it up, but never assume nefarious means when simple stupidity
Exactly, that's it.
can answer the,
You
the
never
mail.
assume bad intent when you can explain it to just being stupid. And I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to use that.
That is a good one. We've got to
I'm gonna
commit
use
But
that
generally,
so
so I
much.
think that when people blame the government or say the government's doing it, I think that they give them way too much credit. Because I think they're just basically trying to stay in their jobs. And if sugar water kills you, but you like it, have as much
Give
as
them what you want.
It's possible.
Well, and
All
then
right.
in their cahoots with all of the medical industry,
Right,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
well,
let's
that's-
talk
see,
about the
that's- yeah.
pharmaceutical, let's give them another drug to
Right,
be
so-
thinner
so
or to
that's-
have less
that's basically it.
cholesterol or,
I mean, really,
So-
that's basically it. So I think that, however, I think that we can alter that. And it's up to us to do that in terms of making it easier to do the alternative.
All right. So there are, if you go out there and you start looking for, what is healthy and what is unhealthy, back, I think it was in the 80s, we were on a big push, get away from fats, right?
Right.
Don't eat any fats. And it was all about eating carbohydrates. And today, I think it's fairly well accepted that fats are actually not bad for you. In fact, my son has me not trimming steaks anymore. He's like, eat the fat with the steak. And it's like, man, that's like my guilty pleasure.
Right.
I love the taste of the fat on a bite of steak. And so I'm now doing that, and I'm discovering it's not actually that bad for you. In fact, I think it's probably good for you. So there are some things out there, and the one that strikes me as the most ironic is whole raw milk. So I think whole raw milk, the more I research it, the more I realize it's actually healthy even for people who have a propensity to be lactose intolerant. Whole raw milk is much less reactive in your body than this stuff you buy off the shelf.
I'm allergic to milk. I'm allergic
may
to
not
a
be.
protein in it.
Well, you may not
I had
be.
like all the shots. I had
We're
like
gonna- I'm gonna-
over 100
we're gonna-
shots in a day.
We're going to
something like
give you a
glass of milk.
raw whole milk, and,
I see
and
what
I'm going to video. Just,
Well,
no, we're going to
basically-
do it.
She
We're
has
gonna,
an EpiPen nearby.
we'll have a crack.
It
We'll have
doesn't,
one of those
I don't
paddles.
die, but it makes me super sleepy. Like they
Oh.
give you all these shots, and you have
Then
to
you-
write
you're
your
eating-
name
you're
like
drinking milk
15
every day,
minutes.
aren't you?
I really am.
That's why the Red Bull. All right.
I'm
so,
up and down
So
all
we're
the
gonna
time.
we're gonna explore some of these subjects, but I think that they bear a lot of investigations. All right. So in the beginning, I asked a question, and I want to close out because again, we could take this in 50 more directions. But was it a mistake to add EZ Homesteading on an already full plate of running and managing FantomWorks? So based on at least thinking about some of these things, have your thoughts changed a little bit, or are you still...
I mean, I understand the business. I don't think it meshes with what we do. Like
It's a different business.
right. So I think we have enough going on that necessarily adding another business and cameras and all of that was not the greatest decision. I don't fully agree with
Okay,
that.
so we have a nay.
Yeah.
Melissa?
Well, I think using that bridge to the survival, the EMP proofing of vehicles, using that as your bridge to your survival world, I think that's a good bridge. I mean, I think,
Okay.
you know, I definitely see the disadvantages, but I can also see the advantages. You know, we're not going to have to super skilled employees. We don't have to, you know, they're going to, you know, I want them to be knowledgeable, yes, but they don't have to be as skilled as painting a vehicle or putting together, assembling a vehicle, disassembling a vehicle, you know, that, and using those tools and equipment, we won't have as many tools and equipment. You know, it's going to be more inventory, and it's going to be them showing people how to use inventory and educating people and that. So in that respect, I think hopefully it will be easier on you too.
Okay. And I'm guessing you.
Look, Dan, certain people are born entrepreneurs, certain people are adventurers, and they're always looking for the next challenge. And I don't think you can ask whether it's a good idea or a bad idea in the absolute. The question is it a good idea or a bad idea for you? That's it. That's really it. Because if you ask me or Audrey or, you know, Melissa, I mean, each of us will have our opinion. But the real question is, for people who are born to do certain things, you know, it's like, why climb that mountain? You know,
Right?
You know, you already
This is
climbed a lot of
there.
mountains. Why do you want to climb that one? Well, because, you know, it's there and because I feel I want to do it. And I know, like my wife says the same thing. She says, "You're working with Dan? I thought you said that after Get My Boat, after you did whatever you were going to do, you know, you've made enough money. You know, why do you need to do that?"
To get another Jeep.
And the thing is, I don't need to do that, but unfortunately, I'm driven to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because if not, you know, what will I do with my days? I need to be able to harass Dan or have him harass me.
Or not answer the phone.
Or not answer the phone or
you know.
whatever. But
Have
I
y'all
think,
tried
look,
fishing? Like, have y'all
yeah,
tried
but
like
part of it is,
normal
look,
things?
I think, with all due respect, I think it's a wrong question to whether it was a good idea to do the business. That the question is really, do you want to do it, and does it fill a need in you to make it happen?
Okay, well then I will answer that, because I mean, we obviously have some that would say no, and even though it was the wrong question. But for me, let me tell you what I've discovered, especially in the last 2 weeks. I enjoy getting out of bed and coming to work.
Well, that's it.
And let me tell you, there's been a long period where doing that has been, and now I look forward to coming in here, and there's more phone calls, more problems, more, this isn't being shipped,
Right.
that's, but it's exciting. And it's, so to me, it's a little bit like having another baby. You know, it's like the kids that you've got, I don't really want to take care of them anymore, but yeah, this new one, let's see if we can do better with this new one. So for me, I think it was a good decision.
You know, a lot of it is like art. It's like art. You know, you're creating something new, and that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So,
All right, so then rather than diving into other subjects, we're going to close this one out here. But basically, what I wanted to start with is, like, I was going to do it anyway, all right? So it's not like they were going to change my mind. EZ Homesteading is going. But what I wanted to do was sort of answer the questions for a lot of people. You know, how do you start a business? What are the things to consider? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? We've talked about a lot of those. And so we're going ahead with it. And so this series is going to go through everything from talking about the virtual farmers market and getting grain from this farm to that house. We're going to actually go do that. We're also going to be building EMP vehicles, and we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about all sorts of things and sort of following the evolution of the company as it goes along. And I'll be honest, I don't know exactly where it's going because, you know, we haven't built a lot of it yet.
that's a fun part of it.
Yeah, it's going to take us down the path. So please stay with us, and hopefully this crew will still be with us. And if you notice that it's only me in another few months, you'll know that it hasn't gone quite as well as I hoped. But
You ran us off.
I think the crew will be with us for the long run, and I hope you'll stay with us too.